Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to season 2 of Fly Fishers International Online, FFI Online. I'm really great. It's really great to be able to introduce Al and Gretchen Beatty. They are both Buzz Buszek Award recipients, Buzz Buszek Fly Tying Award recipients. They are authors of numerous books. You probably have seen them in many fly fishing magazines with their fly tying. Al and Gretchen are associated with the fly tying group. Al was a previous chairperson. Just want to let everybody know that we're here to have a good time, and right now Al and Gretchen's program is on how to use a rotating vise and showing you a lot of extremely great techniques. So with that, I'm going to turn everything over to Al and Gretchen. Welcome, everybody.
Well, thank you, Jerry. I surely appreciate that. I see you've spotlighted us, so we'll have the screen for a little bit, but we'll try not to hog it too much. But anyway, to all of you, I'm Al Beatty from Boise, Idaho, and with me is my lovely wife, Gretchen. I'm supposedly the presenter tonight, and she's the IT person, but, well, we're always kind of glued at the hip, so wherever I go, she's there as well, and vice versa. But anyway, Jerry was right. We're going to talk about rotating vices. Now, he said we're going to show you a whole bunch of stuff. That's probably not true, but I am going to start out with a screen share, if you would, Gretch. Going to the, all right. There we go. And we need to go on that one right there.
It's all that technical stuff.
Okay, good. Now, Jerry, are you seeing the?
Yes,
the
I see you.
Simulator?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, then the screen share came up, and that's what we wanted to talk to you about. As you can see, the fly that we're going to be tying, rotating a stimulator. Now, a stimulator is no big thing. You all probably know how to tie it, probably do it just as well as we do, if not better. But I'm going to start the presentation tonight with 2 questions. Number 1, do you have an inline rotary vise? Don't answer me, just answer within your own self. Number 2, are you using its full potential? If there's a no in there anywhere, maybe we can help you at least add a few tricks to your tying bag of tricks. Now, one of the things that we found, if you want to go on down to the recipe, Gretchen, I'll get to that in just a minute. Let me get my pencil. One of the things we found in our travels that we see a lot of people with really nice, expensive rotary vices, and they use it to look at the other side of the fly. And sometimes they actually rotate the vise completely around. Not making fun of you. What I'm going to do, though, is show you a little bit of what we call straight tying and rotary tying. But we're going to start out with our materials list, and then we'll take an actual look at the materials. But for right now, let's look at the curved nip hook. Those of you that are into brands, a Tiemco R300, I think it is. I can't remember, but anyway, it's a curved nip hook. The thread is Danville. I've got gray in the recipe, and I happen to grab olive, so it'll go with the green body better, so that's what I'll be using. The tail is deer or elk hair, stacked in its as long as the gap is, and I want to put a check mark next to that. We'll come back to that. Hackle, grizzly, or whatever your color that you like. It really doesn't make any difference. The body is green dubbing, or again, I've got color of choice. It can be anything. We've got the wing, which is deer or elk. You can see what the proportions are there, stacked, and to the end of the tail. And the head's going to be peacock, or it could be dubbing as well. Now you notice the 2 check marks. We're going to talk about those. Let me first clear that off so it don't show up on the other screen. All right, get out of there. And we're going to move over to the vise. So Gretchen, if you'll take me to the vise, get out of the screen share and go to the vise. All right, we've got that up. Well, what we have here at this point is something that means absolutely nothing to all of you on here, but it means a lot to me. I call it my focus fly. And all it's used for is to make sure the camera is in focus. So I'll get it out of the way now. I forgot to take it out. So I'm at least trying to explain to you why it's there. And this is the direction that we're going tonight. This is just a stimulator that I tied earlier today to make sure I still remembered how to do it. And I rotated the vise all the way around that time, you'll notice. But I want you to notice that the wing profile is one that I tend to like. And you'll also remember that I talked about the 2 places where I put my check mark as being the tail and the wing. Well, let me put this away, and we're going to bring up 2 partially tied flies, these are 2 demonstrations, is what you could call them. There's one right there. You can see the wing has got a pretty tight profile. And here's one that has the opposite profile. Now, neither profile is right or wrong. It's your job as a fly tyer to decide what you want your fly to look like, and then to make your materials produce that fly. I particularly like one that has more of a controlled profile, both for the tail and for the wing. And we're going to talk to you about how that happens. And it doesn't just happen. Let's move over to the materials.
Oh, I forgot to tell you.
That's all right.
Yeah.
All right, good. Go back to the.
Hey, Al, when you get back to the vise, try a little bit of a focus. It looked like it was just a little fuzzy.
Okay, let me get a focus fly in there, and then we'll go back.
It was just a little out of focus.
Did you reset that camera? There we go.
I think so. Okay, Jerry, let me zoom in here just to make sure, and move sideways just a little bit. I got some stray strands of dubbing on the head that I use it, and when they're in perfect focus, I can tell.
Yeah, that's in focus there.
Okay, good. Good. All right, well, if you go back to the materials, Gretch. Okay, good. Now we're at the materials. One of the things about putting all this Zoom stuff together is that at least I'm kind of a person that doesn't like to spend a whole lot of money. And I trying to use a camera that has a timeout, and it times itself out in 30 minutes. So we'll be okay now because my 30-minute schedule here, it'll stay on that long. But anyways, you can see here, I've got hooks, I've got hackle, I've got peacock, dubbing, but the hair is what I want to focus in on. We're going to talk about the hair first in this piece right here. I want you to notice the color. I want you to notice that it's a darker fiber along here, and it starts to get a little bit lighter over here. Backbone of the deer starting to go down the side. Now let me set this aside for a moment, and we'll continue on down a little further on the hide on the same animal until we get to this hair. You'll notice that this is very much lighter until you get right out at the tips. And if I move this all the way across, you'll see that it's very light all the way to the tips. Right there, I'm pointing at it, spinning hair, flares all over the place. Frustrating as heck if you're trying to tie humpies and wolves. But yeah, you might get by with it for this right here. But what we're going to use tonight, because I like a tight profile, is hair that doesn't flare as much. And it comes out of this part of the hide. Now let me set this aside for a moment and get my materials, and I'll move back over to the vise. And we'll get started. I'll set the focus fly out of the way. And Jerry, I appreciate you bringing that focus situation to me. It's sometimes not easy to see when you're right on top of it. It's easier for you all to see out there in the world. Anyway, I want you to notice, one thing, just a trick. For any of you guys watching who may be doing one of these yourself, this is just a Hackle Pliers. I put my hook in there and just throw it down on my table. And when I want to pick it up, it's so much easier to pick it up. I guarantee you, under the heat of the battle, if you will, when you're live on the internet or live wherever, trying to chase a hook around that ends up falling on the floor is not something you want to do. Anyway, now we're going to start, and you're going to probably be disappointed at the first part of this fly because, well, doggone, old Al's just going to wrap like he normally does. Now I'm starting out with the thread. It's just a 6/0 Danville. This happens to be olive. Could be any color you want that will go with the fly. I want you to notice something though. This is totally away from the fly itself, but you see this O-ring right here on my bobbin. I cannot tell you in the 40 plus years that I've been traveling and doing fly fishing shows, that the number of times I get to the show and I have to rethread my bobbin because something about traveling down the road makes them all come unthreaded. Well, a fellow in Lewiston, Idaho by the name of Leroy Hyatt called me one day and he says, you know, that's back in the days when we still had telephones and used them. He says, just get an O-ring, capture your thread, and when you get to the other end, all you do is pull it out and start tying. You know what? I haven't had to go looking for a threader in quite a while unless I just break the thread. Now, Gretchen and I always use the starting point of our thread as a starting point or a marking point on how we, on the proportions of the fly. And this is the start of the body. And I'm going to wrap to the end of the shank and I'm going to stop and let this hang down. And I want you to notice that that thread is hanging down just about at the throat of the barb of the hook. On that curved shank hook, if you don't know where the end of the shank is, that's where it is. Now I'm going to wrap back forward and I'm going to come back almost all the way to the return point. You notice I'm hanging just a little bit behind. Let me pop forward just a bit and see if you see where I've got that. I'm just probably 2 thread turns short of returning to my original starting place. Okay, let me back up. Excuse me. Now we're going to select a bundle of that deer hair. And if you'll come over here to the D camera, Gretchen, let's see, let me get this in here so you can see what I'm doing. All right. Now I see a lot of people really mess up their hair. They pull it up and try to cut it out and they get it all messed up. The easiest way to get your hair off the hide and not make a mess out of it is just to take your scissors and lift out what you think you need. And then I'll just cut it off and I make sure that I push my scissors clear down to the hide so that I don't start creating a stubble field all around that will make it hard to trim my hair out. Now let's get over here to the tying vise. And I want you to notice that I've got all kinds of fuzz and crap. Well, I normally rapidly run my finger up and down through this so I do not create static electricity, because static electricity is one of the real enemies of anybody that ties with hair. I'm going to stop for a minute before I clean that out, and we're going to talk about something in static electricity. This product from the grocery store called Static Guard. You'll find it in the laundry section. Ladies think it was made for their clothes to keep them from clinging to their bodies. It wasn't made for them. It was made for us fly tyers so that our materials don't cling to us. Now, I don't want to knock all this out and get it all over my camera, so I'm going to move off camera and get over my wastebasket and clean all this out. I'll be back in just a sec. What's really important is you notice that in running my finger like that rapidly through there, oh, okay, you got a little bit more. You just keep working it out of there. And what I'm doing is by coming down and up and down and up is I'm reversing polarity, if you know anything about electricity, and I'm not building up more static electricity. So you don't want to go down or stroke like this to get your stuff out, because you're just building up static electricity that's going to drive you nuts. All right, now I'm going to take, and I want you to notice that, okay, I've got a really complex hair stacker. It's a shotgun shell base and an old chapstick tube. I've had that thing for almost 40 years. It's just a good buddy of mine, and I just won't get rid of it. That's just the way it is. I sell the darn things. I probably have 500 or 600 of them around here that are in the for sale bin. Nope. I use my old buddy. Now I want you to notice that I take the hair out of the stacker, pointing in the direction I'm going to use it. Now this is going on as a tail, but what if I was doing wings? Well, I see so many people pull the hair out of the stacker, always in the same direction, and then they say, oh darn, I got to put on some wings. So then they have to turn it around. Oh, I misaligned everything. And they have to restack it like I'm going to do right now. Well, always take the hair out of the stacker in the direction that it's going to go on the hook. Real easy to do. This way for tails, that way for wings. And of course, I'm going to go back for the tails. All right. Now I want you to notice that I've got some fibers here that are a whole lot shorter than the others. And I'm going to get rid of those by just grabbing a hold of the end and just knocking those loose and pulling them out. But I don't want to do a lot of stroking on that because I'll build up static electricity and I don't want that. All right. Now, before I tie this on, let's measure it for volume. This is a size 10. You have a different amount of hair in a size 10 than you're going to have in any of the other sizes, 8s or 18s, that use a lot less hair in an 18. Well, there's a number of methods that we use, and this is the one we've hit on that seems to work pretty good. I'm going to take this hair now and just kind of bundle it up by pressing it into a fairly compressed bundle, and now press. Compared to the gap of the hook, it should be less. How much less? Well, how heavy you want your tails to be. I like mine to be about a little bit more than half the gap. Now you measure it for length, but before I do that, let me show you another little trick here that might save some frustration. I'm going to get clear out on the end of the hair here. And I see a lot of people get to this point, and they say, well, okay, I'll tie this on, and I don't want it to come off and twist on the hook, so they really bail into it. Oh, crap. Then they start trying to wrap, and all this hair is getting in their way. And they're snagging it and trying to wrap some more. Well, let me show you the trick. We'll just measure our tail for length now. I want it to be about equal to the gap of the hook. And now I'm going to tie this on with snug but not tight wraps. I don't want it to flare very much. I'm going to wrap back to the next point, and now I'm going to really whale into it and just really tight. Well, what I've done is I've controlled the hair so it doesn't get in my way during the rest of the application. Now I'm going to wrap towards the end here. Okay, and I like the hair to flare a little bit in my tail, not a lot, but a bit. All right, I've got some Grizzly Hackle here. I'll just get one of those out of my, I already prepared it so we wouldn't have to mess around stripping fibers and all that stuff. And I'll tie it on as I wrap back. Now I want you to notice that I have a little bit of bare stem right there. And that's so that you don't end up with some fibers sticking back in the tail that you don't want. Now I'll wrap back forward to this front area and trim off. And I want you to notice that I pull this up almost straight up and I do a really severe cut like that. What that does is when I wrap over and recapture those looser wraps that I put on a little bit ago, I'm going to taper the front of that body. So my wing, it identifies how my wing's going to set. With a tapered body, my wing sets a little flatter like that. If I leave a big bump there, my wing's going to set more up like that. Again, you're the fly tyer. You decide how you want it to look. I want my wing profile to be fairly tight, like I like the profile of the wing itself. Okay, now I'll set this aside, and we're going to put on the dubbing. We are getting to the rotary tying, folks. Bear with me. We'll be there in just a minute. Okay, now I'm going to pull my thread out and bring it back here so you can watch as I put my dubbing wax on. I'm using some good dubbing wax by Beatty's, made by Gretchen herself. So I'll give her a plug. It's available on our website if you're interested. And now I've got some soft touch dubbing. And it's if you're looking for some equivalency, it would be very, very much equivalent to muskrat belly fur. And I want you to notice how that sticky thread grabs the fibers. But you get an even distribution. If you get an even amount of wax, then you get a pretty even distribution of your fibers. Now I'm going to switch this over to the other hand and twist that dubbing into place. Now you may wonder, why am I doing it this way with the dubbing to the back of the hook? Because I got to tell you, for 60 some years, I've been doing it right over here. And guess what? There's this camera in the way. That's so you all out there can see. My new office is quite different than the one I used to have when you were on one side of the table and I was on the other. But now I'm going to start to wrap my dubbing starting at the front of the body and working towards the back. Well, I did promise that I would rotate things, so let's rotate it a little bit. Well, you know, I can rotate and wrap at the same time. Wow. Well, hey, you know, how many times have you guys tied a fly and you look at that and you pick it up and you say, wow, that fly looks really good. And then you look at the other side and you missed a spot. Well, if you use this technique, you don't miss any spots. Until I get back here, and now I'm just going to go ahead and wrap right down to the tail itself. And now we're getting ready to advance our hackle and thread forward. Now, there's a couple of things that we can do here. We can advance the thread in front of the hackle, and that will produce one effect. I'm going to, however, advance it with the thread behind the hackle, because what that does is it will place a turn of thread around every turn of hackle, and I'm in essence ribbing over my hackle as I wrap at the same time. So I want you to notice I'm using my ring finger on my right hand and the first two fingers to hold the hackle in place. Now here's one we call the drop tie off that comes from our book, Rotary Tying Techniques. I just drop that and keep right on rotating. And I tied off the feather. That's called the drop tie off. Now, if you do it fast, you can make your friends say, oh, Jesus, how did you do that? Well, there's no magic to it. There isn't anything magical about fly tying at all. It's just, you know, my mother is so proud of me. I wrap thread around a piece of wire and, and people think it's pretty cool. That's interesting what we get known for. Anyway, I'm going to trim that off right there. And we're doing pretty good on time.
Yeah, we are. We're at 23 minutes.
So I've got about 7 minutes to go then, huh? Okay.
Well, you got more than that.
All right. Well, let's go back over to the D camera.
Because you can go to...
And get another bundle of hair. And I'm going to get a little bit bigger bundle this time.
Sorry.
And I'll cut that out of there. And now we'll go back to the vise again. And you notice I still have to get rid of all that fuzz, but I got a lot more fuzz to get rid of. And I'm just going to do that out over the wastebasket.
We don't have a camera over the wastebasket.
That, thank God. they would see an awful mess. I mean, Jesus. Anyway. So now we're going to I'll quickly move my finger up and down again, and there's a little bit more there we'll get rid of. All right, great. Now I know that's going to be a little bit too much, so I'm just going to get rid of some of it. I got a little bit too enthusiastic about what I trimmed off there. And now I'll get my hair stacker, and I'll put her in there, and we'll tap that out even. Now we're going to get to decide just how much hair do we want in our wings. Well, we want twice as much in the wing as we have in the tail. At least that's what we like on ours. And first off, I want to get a hold of the very butt ends and get rid of all these short guys. I'll just move over my waist trawl here and do that. Get rid of those.
Got
And
some fibers hanging there on your hook.
Oh, thanks, Gretchen. Yeah, that I'm looking into a light and I can't see it quite as good as you can. Thank you. Okay, now remember, I just bundle the fibers, kind of pinch everything together until they're all nicely bundled up, and now pinch. And if that's pretty much equal to the gap of the hook, then I've got about the right amount of hair. And that's what we have. Now I want you to notice that I also advanced my thread forward to the center of the bare area in front. We call that the hackle platform area. It's going to be where the wing is anchored and where the hackle platform goes. Anyway, so we'll tie that on in the middle of that area. And I'm going to measure this to the end of the tail. And I see an awful lot of fly tyers get to this point, and then thread torque gets into the fix. And the next thing you know, their wing ends up on the side or just doesn't go where they want it. Well, there's a trick to keeping that stuff up on top. Notice that I measured it again this time for length, same length, but this time the hackle is above the hook. I am going to take a loop of thread around the hair. See how I captured that? Now I'm just going to slide that down to the hook and start to bind it in place. Guarantee you it isn't going anywhere because it's figure eighted to the top of the hook. And now I'm going to wrap a little bit looser wraps as I go back because I want to pull the profile of that wing in a bit. See how that wing profile pulls in? Now, if I put some pressure on it, it starts to flare out. I'll put a little bit more pressure on it. See how that flares out? Well, let me back up. I don't want that. So I'm using, in the center of that hackle platform, I'm using really tight anchor wraps to anchor my hair. And then as I go back towards the body, I'm using softer holding wraps so I can shape the hackle platform one, and I'm also shaping the wing profile. All righty. Now, Jerry, I haven't got any questions from you yet. I'm kind of surprised. You got anything there for me?
Nothing yet. And I'll just remind everybody, if you do have questions on the bottom, on the bottom of the panel, there's a Q&A. You click that, and I will definitely tell Al and Gretchen your question, and they'll answer it online.
Okay, good. Well, anyway, we'll give them a chance to think about that. There may be some typing right now, and in the meantime, I'm going to take my peacock curl, and I'm just going to tie it on at the front of the hook by the tips, base ends pointing forward. And I'm going to grab a half hitch tool, and I have a really fancy half hitch tool. It's an old knitting needle, and again, I've had that thing for about 40 years, and I know I have thousands of the doggone ones that you buy and the ones we sell, but I just love that old thing. All right, now I'm going to pull a little bit of thread out of my bobbin and grab the thread and the peacock together. And I'm just going to rotate the vise and form kind of a peacock chenille with a thread core. I'm doing it slower than I normally do, just so you can see that right in this area here, it's really starting to build up into a pretty nice looking peacock chenille. And as it gets tighter and tighter, it moves further and further back. But for right now, that's probably all we need. And I'm going to wrap back to meet the hackle. And then I'm going to come back forward to the front and stop when I reach the front. I could have tied it off at the back. I elected to come forward. We'll show you why here in just a moment. All right.
Was there a question?
One of the questions that came up is, what part of the hide are you using? And are you using a brand name such as Primo or Comparadon or Belly?
I am not. We buy our hides, complete hides. We only use white-tailed deer, preferably killed early in the season. Why are we so particular? Because for 60 years I've been tying and selling hair wing flies, and when a customer calls and wants another order of the flies to match the ones that I did for him 10 years ago, I want them to show up in the mail looking identical to the ones I did 10 years before. So we always pick the same thing. Now, the hair came off of the hide of the animal. The dark stuff that we're using is along the backbone. If you go take the hide and you go 6 inches on either side, which is going to give you a 1 foot wide strip, you have absolute primo hair for tying wings and tails and humpies, wolves, trudes like the Stimulator, etc. And as you work your way down, then you get into hair that's will flare a little bit more. We'll get to that. Now I could do the same thing that I did before. Oh, wait a minute. Does that answer the question? I'm assuming it did.
That answers the question. And someone asked, will the slides and recording of the broadcast be available after tonight? The recording is, we're recording now. They will be on the FFI YouTube playlist, and will also be available on the FFI Online website under previous recordings. Like, you can go back and see many of the other recordings that were done in season 1 also there. And we had one other question from Kevin. Are there ever advantages to hand wrapping instead of rotating the vise?
Absolutely. I hand wrap all the time. I mix them. I sometimes hand wrap. There was another question came up, but yes, we hand wrap. And there are times, I can tell you as an example, when I am putting hair or hackle on a wolf or a humpy, to get it to go right, you just about have to hand wrap it so that you can cover up the gaps that show up under the wings because of the bulk of the hair wing. It's something to show in another presentation. But anyway, that's one of the times when it's almost mandatory to do so.
And
now there's another question came in before I leave. I guess we could answer that too, Jerry.
Yeah, the other one was, let's see, if you were tying a pattern as a golden stone, would you still use peacock for the thorax, or would you dub?
No, if you remember, I could go back to it, but there's no reason to. In the recipe, we said peacock or choice, and you could do it. I did this demonstration for a club several nights ago, and they wanted it as a October caddis, and we had orange dubbing all the way through, including the head. So it's I call these foundation flies. You start out with a general concept, and then you replace materials and colors and sizes until it represents what you want it to represent. Again, you're the fly tyer, and it's your job to make it be what you want it to be.
Al, you might talk about how to select hair when you have to go to the store and buy it instead of having access to a whole hide.
Right. One of the things that you notice that I pointed out, the dark and the light and all that type of stuff. Well, when you have when you're as fortunate as we are and we get to select our hair from a complete hide, and we do that and we get a hide home and we cut it up into its various job duties, if you will, with the dark hair along this strip of along the back going for the hair wing flies. Well, when you're standing in a fly shop and you're looking at a whole bunch of 3x5 bags on the wall, you say, oh man, what do I look for? Well, what you look for is the color that we talked about. If you'll recall, in fact, would you go back to the D camera, Gretchen? Okay, we're looking at the piece of hair that we're using right now. It's from along the backbone, dark. In fact, I would call that hair basically 80% dark, 20% light, maybe even 90% over here. And it's probably more like 80% dark and 20% light down here. But when you get to this piece of hair, let me move that out of the way. Now you're looking at hair that gets a lot lighter. And the way we look at it is we look at the hair in a light to dark ratio that we call it. And you heard the percentage that I used just a little bit ago. If you're tying humpies and wolves and they're going to be fairly large, then you want hair that's dark throughout most of the fiber. Now, let me show you something here. Right here on this one. Right up in here, it's really dark right along the tips. Well, that's really good wing and tail material when you're tying size 16s and 18s, because guess what? You're using it way out on the tip. And so that's the process that we go through in the selecting hair. And I hope that answered your question.
Sure.
Without getting into the weeds too much.
One more thing. Larry has a question, and he wants to know about elk versus deer, because some stimulators are tied with elk instead of deer, and wants to know, is there a flaring problem when you use elk or deer?
Excellent question. Thank you for answering it. I was hoping that someone would ask that, or I was going to have to bring it up myself. The selection of where it comes off the body is the same. Along the backbone, down over the shoulder, down over the rump for wings and tails, down into the rib and flank areas for flaring. And the problem with elk, that's why we're not using it tonight, it's more difficult to illustrate that. You have to go more by feel, because some of that hair along the backbone of the elk is really dark. And in other spots or other times of the year, depending on when the animal is harvested, it's going to be much lighter. So there's a little bit more by feel. So that's more difficult. But with deer hair, it's pretty straightforward, especially if you're using whitetail.
So another person asked, and this doesn't fit with the stimulator, and it's about dubbing loops with the rotary vise. And I know I use them a lot with stonefly nymphs when I do a dubbing loop, and I prefer a rotary vise while doing a dubbing loop. How about you, Al?
I do it both ways, and it depends on the pattern and what I'm trying to accomplish. Dubbing loops are incredible if I want to really have a picked out body, but there's times that I don't want to have a picked out body, or I only want part of the body picked out. There's a couple of nymphs that we tie that for customers, they're not on the market. They're just ones we tie for customers, and we just take and wrap put the dubbing on the thread and only twist the dubbing at the back part, and the front part, it stays untwisted. And as we wrap it on, it builds a tapered and fluffed up body. So you'll have an abdomen and a thorax built out of the same application of dubbing. So it depends. And I hate to give you an it depends answer, but the truth of the matter is it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what the materials are you're working with.
Jim wanted to know about whether we use a rawhide or processed hide. And I guess we've used both, but from my perspective, I like a processed hide because there are some materials that they put on the rawhide to dry them that cause me problems.
Yeah,
I'm allergic to saporate or whatever it is. So we try to use processed hides.
One of the problems with processed hides, when you're looking at those packages in the fly shop or you're buying a complete hide, look at the very end of the tip of the hair. You'll look at the hair in the package and say, God, that's nice and straight and beautiful. And you'll get home and it'll have a little hook at the end. And when you run into that, I got a trick for you that has nothing to do with this fly, but let me get a piece of hair here real quick, and I'll put it up on the camera here. I want you to notice that there's a little bit of a curve in that hair. Not as bad as it could have, but you can straighten that out. What you do before you stack it or anything, you take your thumbnail and your forefinger and you pinch it on the outside of the bend until it's straightened out. And that'll work with any hair. And I've taken some hair that was almost in a half circle and straightened it out using that method. So whatever that's worth. But I'm going to be running out of time here pretty quick, and I still haven't finished the fly. I think
You got time, Al. Don't worry.
Okay, good. I just didn't want to be staying over my limit.
Plenty of time, Al.
All right, good. Okay, I can't remember if I put a half hitch on that, so I'm going to put a half hitch on because we need.
You did.
I did. Well, it's going to get two of them then. All right, good.
And Al, we all with these rotary vises, that is the major technique, is making sure you do put a half hitch on before you end up rotating it.
Isn't that the truth? Things can come undone at the most inopportune time, even on live internet television. I mean, goodness, anyway, set that aside. Now I've got some options here. We're back to tying the fly. I can do just like I did before, except I'll use my ring finger on the same hand as a bobbin rest, and I can start to rotate and use it as a bobbin rest or thread rest, if you will. But we may as well talk about thread rest and bobbin rest for a little bit because they often get misused. So we may as well show you a trick or two about using them. I see an awful lot of people use the bobbin rest as a thread rest, and they just take and rest the thread over it. And let me crank my thread up just a little bit so you can see where the bobbin is. Okay, there we go. And that may look like the way some of you use your bobbin rest. And then you rotate and do whatever you're going to do, wrapping your hackle or whatever. And then it's time to tie off the hackle. Well, okay, I better get that bobbin rest out of the way. So I get it out of the way. Oh, darn, my thread's too long. And so I got to crank it up until I get it up where I need it. Well, let me show you a trick. Now that's what I call working length thread. I got about an inch there. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes less. But remember where I had that bobbin rest? This time it's going to be a real bobbin rest because I'm going to lower it and rest the bobbin on it so everything is in line. So now when I rotate that, Well, I'll be darned if the son of a gun, it doesn't stay at the working length and I don't have to be twisting it up and down. Now, if you have the Norvise retractable, and I got bunches of them, but that's not part of tonight's demonstration, then you don't need to worry about that. It'll wind itself back up. But anyway, what we're going to do now is we're going to wrap our hackle.
Now,
And I'll stop right there. I'll just drop that and keep rotating the vise. And I tied it off again. You already know that trick, so you shouldn't be gee whiz by it right now. I want you to notice that it's tied off on top. I'm about ready to finish this fly up, and I cannot tell you how many fly tires I see get up to this point and take a good looking fly and really mess it up in the last 30 seconds they spend with it. And here's how you mess it up. Number one, you think to yourself, darn, I don't want that to come apart. Well, I better put on another couple turns of thread. Well, then I put on, there's 2 turns holding that right now. I'm going to put on number 3, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Well, that'll hold it. Then I cut off the feather. Oh, darn, I got to cover that up. And you end up with a good looking fly and a big lopsided head. Let's back up.
By the way, he's not tying on a Norvise.
and that is a question that came up, and with all the years of experience you have, both of you, what vices do you recommend for a beginner?
Boy, I'll tell you what, for a beginner, if there's a chance that they would end up tying some rotary stuff, we think the Griffin's Patriot or the Griffin's Mongoose are 2 reasonably inexpensive, really good vices. One is a rotating vise and the other one is an inline rotary vise. If you want to go a little bit more expensive, you've got the Dynakings and the Renzettis, or you've got this vise right here. It's a plastic vise from Denmark. I mean, for lack of better words, we sold it for years and years, and at the time we were selling it in the last 20 years, it sold for somewhere between $80 and $100. If it'll hold the hook, that's all you really care about. You know, that'd be the way I'd look at it. And by the way, we have a couple of Norvises. There are times we use them. They're an incredible vise for what they're for. But when we're commercial tying, time is money, and there are just some things the Norvise don't do as well as other vices. And sometimes we don't even use an inline rotary vise. I've got an old HMH standard that I got back in the late 70s. It's got one of the earliest numbers on it. I think it's 3 or 4 or something like that. Anyway, that's still one of the vices that I go to for, if I'm tying midges, that's the vise that I go for. Don't ask me why. It's kind of like my hair stacker and my half hitch tool. They're just old buddies, and that's just the way it is. Anyhow, let's get back to the fly that we're tying. We're going to make a good looking head instead of a bad looking head. Now I've unwrapped the thread so that there's only 2 turns of thread anchoring that feather in place. Now I'm going to build a jam knot in front of the feather that builds a thread head and at the same time kicks that hackle back. So the hackle is already anchored this way. I am going to anchor it then with a jam knot pushing it back. So it's going to be double anchored, and we're going to put a dog leg in the stem, makes it a lot harder to pull out. So I'm going to pull that back. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cover most of it up. Maybe you can see a little bit. And I'll just wrap that thread head there. And what it's doing is not wrapping over anything. All it's doing is pushing back against that feather. You see how that feather is kicked back there right now? It's not going anywhere. It's well anchored. Let me get my whip finish tool out, and we're going to put on a whip finish. You can go to our YouTube channel to see what we call a good whip and a bad whip. But a good whip starts back on the head, and each subsequent turn gets closer to the eye. If you go the other way, you've got a bad whip. And if you want to know why, it's on our YouTube channel. But I'll put about 4 turns there and pull it. And that'll be done. I'll get rid of the thread. Now let's talk about trimming off that hackle. Oh, before I do anything. I don't want to get to the next show and have to restring everything. So there we go. It's captured and under control. Now we're going to cut this feather off. And I'll tell you what, again, conventional wisdom would have you say, well, dang, I don't want that to show. I better cut it close. Well, you're setting yourself up for what could be a problem. It could possibly pull out if you cut it too close. I'm going to exaggerate the point right now, and I'm going to cut it really quite long. Probably a 1/16 at least. Where'd it go? It's hiding back there. It provides just a little stub there, and I never use glue when I got a camera around, but when I get ready to glue, you notice how I flip my fly over? Well, I get to pretend that there's glue on this bodkin. Let's see if I can get, there we go. And that's how you do it. Well, that glue will run down into the hackle. It'll also grab that little stub up there you can't see anyway, and makes it almost impossible to come apart. You know how to tell when your fly comes apart or whether a snaggletooth brown tore the hackle? When you look at the feather that came unwound, if the end of the feather is chopped even, it broke. If it's got a little hook on it, it pulled out. Anyway, that's the end of the demonstration, and now we're more than happy to field questions from you.
Al, one of the questions was from would appreciate an explanation of your camera and lighting setup system.
Okay, it's do you want me to grab another camera and do a review of it, or do you just want me to talk about it?
I think grab another camera if you can.
Okay, it's going to take a second. Let me,
you know,
We
there's
can
always
grab the material camera, that'll work.
no, we're going to turn that one off.
Oh, we're gonna turn that one off.
Yeah, see, okay, we are using a program called OBS. Don't laugh. It's not OBS. It's OBS Studio, and the OB and S stands for Open Broadcaster Software. It's a free program, does some phenomenal stuff. And I'm going to turn on my floating camera, I call it.
Russ text that said, did you ever do a YouTube video of your video setup?
I have not, you know, and I've received enough questions about it that I probably should. But anyway, with it, hit F and see if that thing comes up. No, it doesn't. I'm going to have to go out of here and turn it on. Go to the, okay, there we go. Let me get out of here. I'll go into OBS and turn it on. Okay, floating webcam.
One of the things, Al, and this was a good a question that I know I field a lot. How important is the align the shank of the hook with the axis of the vise?
You know, that's reasonably important, but
because I know that when I get that question, I usually come out and say that's where the rotary vise excels when you start doing that, where you don't get a hook wobble when you align it perfectly with the axis.
Right. It's you know, it can be really important. There are even times when it's good to have it out of whack a little bit for some reasons, and I can't tell you one right off the top of my head, but I know that I have purposely put it out of line for whatever reason, and I can't tell you one right now, but they're better to be in line, and you'll notice this one is more or less in line, but not quite, but it's close enough. And right now you're looking at what looks like one heck of a bunch of a mess. But that's okay, because I'm going to go grab that camera. We keep this camera strictly for floating around and showing people the very question that we talked about. Okay. Now if anybody's prone to seasickness, just close your eyes because we're bouncing all over right at the moment while I'm getting this camera out. Well, first off, like a lot of people, we have a laptop. You can see that I've got cords plugged into the right side and to the left side, and those are running different cameras. I also want to show you something that you have a tendency, and I still have to fight with this. There's a little guy that I talk to, and you think I'm talking to you. I'm not. I'm talking to this little guy, so it looks like I'm talking to you out there in the audience. It's one of the things that I really miss about having you across the table from me is that, God dang, there's no eye contact, and that screen just drives me nuts. I hate to look at it. But anyhow, going from there, these are all the cords going to the cameras. And Each camera is a digital SLR. It has, I'm going to move over here for just a moment. It has one of these devices right here, and it's called a video capture card. And you might wonder why all that tape is on there. Well, that's because experience has taught me that things will come unplugged when you least want them to. So I tape everything together. This is the USB cable coming out of here. This end right here is an HDMI going to the camera that is the right here, the one pointing at the vise. So anyway, let's get back over here now. I want you to notice that I have a really exotic frame for all of my stuff. It's some pipe clamps that I took out of my woodworking shop, and they work really well for supporting stuff, including lights. Now I want you to notice that I've got lights down here at the bottom, slightly to the front of the vise, pointing at the fly from beneath. I have my regular large fly tying lamp above, and then I have an additional light here in the back. We're going to talk about those in a minute, but let's move on now to the camera over here. And all I got is a couple pieces of board, a 2x4, some strap iron, and an old Nikon that's mounted there on the materials. And let's see, we've got the two lights behind to shine on us. And I guess that's about it. The one thing that I do need to show you, if you want to go over to the fly vise, the S vise, or the S camera. Okay, good. Now, the reason we have the lighting the way we do, and we have tried everything under the sun, and this is for live demonstrations, we find that with the lighting that we have, where we have lights coming in from low, I'm pointing down right now. I have another one coming in from that direction. And then I have the lights coming in from, let me get a pointer here instead of using my finger. We got the light coming in from straight above. And then we have another light coming in from the back. And that's the hair light. Well, why do we need a hair light? Well, back in the days when I did some portrait photography in the studio, you always put a hair light from the back and over the shoulder of the person being photographed to provide separation between them and the background. And I don't know if you noticed or not, but our background is about almost 3 foot from the camera. You know, so we want that far enough back so that none of these lights will throw a shadow on the background, because that's distracting. So anyway, the reason we have lights like this is so I can reach in and work on the fly. And if I move that thumb up, it's still got light on the fly. No matter where I go,
Hi.
we're always getting light on the fly
Baby.
so that it doesn't go dark on you. All right,
Cardi.
I'm going to turn the below lights off. Still looks pretty good till I reach in and block all my light. Oh, darn, I can even raise that finger up like I did before. It's still a black fly. You can't see anything. Well, so all I got is the above tying light and the hair light. Well, just so you can see, the hair light does almost nothing except it provides separation from the background behind it. So quit hitting the fly out of the camera. And turn that back on. And I'll turn on the lower lights. We're back to normal. The last thing, camera. The camera rests on a thing called a Manfrotto Arm. They run about $200. They're not cheap, but what they do is it allows you to get the tripod off the floor, sitting between you and your fly. It's it works really great, but it's a little bit on the expensive side. I had just a piece of 1x4 with some C clamps. Would you grab that 1x4 up there, Gretchen? Don't forget to pull off your microphone. Okay, and then I'll come over here to this camera and we'll show it to them. We started out with to get rid of the tripod sitting between us and our fly. We built this contraption that Gretchen is grabbing for you right now. And it's nothing but a 1x4 This part goes on the table. These things right here, because you really have to bail into the C-clamps so it won't put any bad holes. And this right here is just a elevator type thing that allows you to raise and lower the camera. So that's a real simple thing. But one of the problems that we had with that is it was perfect for me, but Gretchen doesn't have long enough arms. And she can't reach the fly. So we got this other arm, and it gives us the ability to just quickly move it forward and back, and it holds it rock solid. Again, that is a Manfrotto Model 244 Magic Arm. Manfrotto 244 Magic Arm. So I guess that has answered everybody's questions.
That should have done it. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Gretchen and Al for hosting and doing this. Duke, do a search. Duke has asked one quick question. Your web address.
Oh, the web address is I left it off because I wasn't sure the Federation would like me advertising like that.
That's
but
fine.
The web address is btsflyfishing.com. Boy Tom Sam flyfishing.com.
Okay.
And one last thing, Fred Dupre was supposed to be on tonight to run this for FFI, and he had to make an emergency trip to the hospital with a heart problem. We don't know how serious it is, but our prayers go out to him and his family and hope that he's doing well. But anyway, with that, we'll close out.
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Gretchen. We really appreciated this. Thank you, everybody, for attending. This is one of our programs that FFI does, and we really appreciate your membership and to continue with more and more of these type of programs. Thanks again, Al. Thanks.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Take care.